Hey all, and welcome to today's video. I thought it would be nice to walk through a match again. The video will be a little bit longer, but I will make sure that it's cut up into pieces, and if you want to skip a part, that's perfectly fine. So I started recording this match because when we were about in the first or the second round, my opponent used the Duke of Crows. And Duke of Crows is a very useful patron, but you should never use it too early. And I'm not saying that I play perfectly, and I'm not trying to make a fool of anyone, but I do hope that people can learn a little bit from this one, because I do see it happen very often. So what happens when you use Duke of Crows? You convert the gold that you have to prestige. And in the beginning, first of all, you don't usually have a lot of gold left. So when I started recording, with 1 prestige. That's not a lot. And also, very important, when the Duke of Crows is favoring you, it's useless. You cannot do anything with it. And I'm not going to be nice here, but when I see this happening, I won't use Duke of Crows unless I really need to. Yeah, so that basically means that my opponent has no more use for Duke of Crows, and won't have a way to get rid of excess gold later in the game. So it might be that my opponent is going for a patron win. I'm trying to not let that happen. If you pay attention to the patrons that we have in this game, we also have the Psijic one. And for the Psijic one, you use that one if your opponent has an agent on the table. You pay 4 gold and then you get rid of the agent. Now what I'm going to do is I will avoid putting down agents on the table. So what I would be doing, ideally if I put an agent down, I would use the Hlaalu patron to get rid of the agent. I would sacrifice the card and then get the cost of the card -1 back in prestige. Ideally, you would not want to sacrifice your strongest agent cards, but in this case, I am also going for a combination of the green and the yellow cards. And if you use a lot of Hlaalu cards, you can usually get a lot of stronger cards in the game pretty soon. I think some people really underestimate how strong this deck can be. There's some really strong cards in there, and a lot of those cards have the play effect where you can just get a card from the tavern with, for example, a value of up to 5 or 7 or even 9. That's pretty strong if you are going to sacrifice those cards later, because a card with a cost of 10 gives you 9 prestige if you sacrifice it. So in this game, I'm just going to get rid of cards that are not green or yellow, and I'm going to go for that tactic. The tavern was really in my favor here. I managed to get some good cards pretty early on, and I'm just looking for cards that I can sacrifice. That's what I'm going for here. I did notice that a lot of people do not clean up their deck. I personally did not do it either when I started to play Tribute, but I've become a very big fan of it, because if you clean up your deck, for example, ideally you would even want to get rid of your starter cards, the ones that just give 1 gold or 1 power. Ideally you want to get rid of them, and unless you're playing with Orgnum Patron and trying to go for that, those starter cards are just going to get in the way, because if you get them in between, then there's no space in your hand for stronger cards. So I really believe now that it is part of building your deck during a match to also get rid of cards and to sacrifice cards. For example, that one, it's 3 coin, it helped me at the start, now I'm just going to get rid of it. I had to get used to the idea that some cards that I collected earlier, I'm just going to get rid of them, but it has really helped me. It helped me get better hands, better combos, and yeah, I really think it's a good thing. The Hlaalu deck matches great with the green deck, and in this match I was heavily depending on the green deck too. I love the choices that you can make with them. Often one of their choices is get 3 or 4 power, which is a pretty decent amount, and other choices can be very useful, like getting a card from the tavern with a cost of up to 4. So when you're building your deck, that's great. And in this case I was of course also using the Hlaalu patron a lot. So I could just grab a card with a cost of up to 4 and later sacrifice it. And also there's cards with the option to move cards from your cooldown stack to your hand. If you make a good combo with the green deck, you can basically determine your whole hand in the next match. I do have to make a small remark with that, unfortunately, because I made one mistake with that earlier. Before you click that option and that choice, please check if you really have a cooldown stack at that moment. I once tried to use it when my cooldown stack was empty. That was a little bit dorky, but when you have cards in your cooldown stack, it's really worth using green cards to determine your hand in the next round, because then you can make some really great combos that you otherwise would only get if you have good RNG. So really useful. I really love the green deck. This is, by the way, a bit of a funny point in the match, because I reached a state here that it did not want to reach, where I have 2 agents on the table. Of course, I could get rid of both of them if I had 8 gold and the opportunity to use 2 patrons in this round. Yeah, I decided to still get rid of a base card and leave the agent cards out there. Partially because I felt very comfortable where I already had the 2 patrons facing my way. Hlaalu, which I have been using a lot, and of which I'm also pretty sure that I'd have the opportunity to use it again soon. And yeah, the green one, it always skips the neutral state. So my opponent could use it for 2 power and then get 1 coin and have that patron favor him. I honestly expected my opponent to use the Psijic patron here to get rid of my active agent. So that was, I think, one point in the game that I would rather have not reached. My opponent did not use that patron, so that was fine for me at that point. I still think that I would have been fine, and I was starting to feel really comfortable here, and I'm just picking some cards to show up at the top of my next hand, and I was just having a pretty good time at this point. So I also feel comfortable to talk about another item. Something I see a lot of players do, especially in the beginning of a match, is use up all their gold even when they should not necessarily do that. For example, I think it's a card of 3 gold, one that can kick out active agents. Sometimes I see people picking that up if there's no active agent. It does free up a spot in the tavern for a new card, but if you don't have any gold to pick up that new card, if you like that card, then it might also be the case that you're just helping your opponent getting a nice card, because you never know whether or not the next card that's going to show up in the tavern is one that you really want. So what I try to do nowadays is just leave it up to my opponents to clean up the tavern, if I can. my opponent did something really clever there. They snatched the Tithe card from the tavern, even though they're not necessarily going to use it. The Tithe card is only 3 gold, and it gives you an extra turn of using a patron in the same round. Normally you can only use 1 patron in a round, and there's of course some cards or some combos that can give you extra turns on using patrons. Now, they're not only useful for going for a patron win, because in this game I was definitely not going for a patron win, but I was using Hlaalu a lot, just because I got a chance to grab so many very expensive cards, and of course if a card is 10 gold and I sacrifice it, it will give me 9 prestige. Also, if for example the only patron you are unfavored by is the crown patron, if you play it smart, you can use that one twice, just for getting the patron, not necessarily for getting more power. But for example, if you use cards to get you 4 gold, you would buy Tithe and you would use the Crow Patron once, and then use other cards that give you a bit more gold. You can use it another time in the same round. That's a way to get a patron win. This video turned out to be a bit long, so sorry for my rambling. Thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful, and of course, have a great day.